This new ETF, QDVO, is a monthly dividend ETF that provides not only high income, but also high growth that challenges some of the best monthly dividend ETFs on the market. And in this video, we're going to dive into all the parts of this ETF and see how it stands against some of the best monthly dividend payers like QQQI, GPIQ, and JEPQ. So let's get into it. So to start it off, let's talk about what makes QDVO different from these other popular monthly dividend ETFs. First off, QDVO is the Amplify CWP Growth and Income ETF. QDVO's investment strategy has two objectives. Its primary objective is to provide high potential returns, and its secondary objective is to generate high monthly income. So what goes into QDVO's strategy? Well, QDVO is mostly made up of large cap stocks with growth characteristics that provide dividend income and the opportunity for capital appreciation. Keep in mind, not all the holdings will pay a dividend, but the portfolio is a diversified mix of growth stocks from the Russell 1000 Growth Index. It screens growth stocks that have a history of increasing earnings or possess strong competitive advantages. Also, QDVO's portfolio is filtered down to hold between 20 to 40 stocks based on earnings growth, cash flow, relative performance, and management's track record. There's also some limitations in place where exposure to any single sector cannot be greater than 50%, and no one individual stock can make up more than 15% of the total portfolio. And last is the tactical covered call writing. Covered call options are written on individual stocks, more specifically selling short-term call option contracts with expiration dates of 1 month or less on some or all of the portfolio. And QDVO also seeks to provide income of around 0 to 2% from dividend income of its holdings and 4 to 6% from option premiums. Now let's talk about how these other ETFs operate so you can see the strategy differences. So next will be QQQI, the NEO's NASDAQ 100 High Income ETF. The objective of QQQI is to generate high monthly income in a tax-efficient manner with the potential for capital appreciation. The targeted benefits of QQQI strategy include providing high monthly income from investing in the NASDAQ 100 and implementing a call option strategy. And they can write index options on up to 100% of the portfolio. Second, it takes advantage of tax loss harvesting opportunities along with utilizing NASDAQ index options that are favorably taxed. Then last, it uses a call option strategy that may include both sold and purchased NASDAQ 100 options, which could provide potential capital appreciation. Next up is GPIQ, the Goldman Sachs NASDAQ 100 Core Premium Income ETF. GPIQ strategy seeks to provide current income while also offering the potential for capital appreciation. Some reasons to consider investing in GPIQ include that it aims to provide consistent monthly income from dividends and option premiums. Second is that GPIQ offers core equity exposure with lower volatility, and it does this by investing in the NASDAQ 100 index, and it applies a dynamic option strategy by selling call options on a varying percentage of the fund's stock holdings, which are based on market conditions. And this dynamic approach means that they adjust the percentage of the portfolio that they write call options on, which can vary from 25 to 75%. And the last reason is for the diversifying source of income that this fund provides. Last, we have JEPQ, the JP Morgan NASDAQ Equity Premium Income ETF. JEPQ's objective is to deliver monthly distributable income and exposure to the NASDAQ 100 with less volatility. It does this by generating income through a combination of investing in U.S. large cap growth stocks and selling out of the money NASDAQ 100 index call options, seeking to deliver a monthly income stream from the option premiums and stock dividends. And JEPQ uses ELNs or equity linked notes instead of selling call options directly, which can make up to 20% of the portfolio. So while growth ETFs are a big factor in all of these ETFs, QDVO stocks are handpicked by the management team, and it isn't based on the NASDAQ 100 in any sense like the others are. Now that you've seen how the strategies of these ETFs work, let's talk about the stocks that make up these funds. So let's get into what makes up the portfolio of QDVO compared to the other funds. When it comes to QDVO's portfolio, this ETF contains 47 holdings in total, with its top holdings in names like Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and more, making up just over 60% of the total portfolio. And the sectors that is exposed to are technology, which makes up about 45%, then communication, consumer discretionary, and the remaining percentages spread in a few other sectors. So a very similar top holding layout that you'd find with some tech-focused ETFs, along with this fund being a bit top heavy. And you'll notice some similarities when you see the portfolio of these other ETFs. As for QQQI, it contains 105 holdings in total. And the top 10 holdings are in companies like Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, the rest of the Mag 7 companies, Broadcom, and Netflix. So essentially the same exposure that you'd find with the NASDAQ 100 ETF like QQQ. And for the sector exposure, technology makes up a little over half of the portfolio, then communication, consumer discretionary, and a few others. If you didn't notice, this NASDAQ 100 based fund doesn't look too different from QDVO. Here's the top holdings of QDVO and QQQI to compare. There are some slight differences in the percentage amounts of those same holdings like Apple, Nvidia, and others, but aside from that, QDVO only holds one Google, which is Class A, and it holds Visa, which the others do not. Next is GPIQ, which has 107 holdings in total. And the top 10 holdings include some of those same names like Nvidia, Amazon, Meta, and others, along with the sector exposure being just about the same as QQQI, with technology at the top, communication, and then consumer discretionary. And since this fund tracks the NASDAQ 100, it's going to be nearly identical to QQQI when it comes to its holdings, so nothing too different here with this fund. Last up is JEPQ, which has 106 holdings in total. And the top 10 holdings are going to look very familiar with the likes of the Mag 7 names, Netflix, and AMD. And the sectors are going to be close to what you'd find in both GPIQ and QQQI. Also, something to consider is that JEPQ loosely tracks the NASDAQ 100, so management can add names that you wouldn't find in the index. There are some strong similarities in all these ETFs when it comes to their top holdings, but the biggest difference maker falls in their strategies. And you'll see why when we talk about the dividend income and the returns that they've provided over time. All right, so let's get into the dividend income and stability of QDVO compared to QQQI, GPIQ, and JEPQ. Now, QDVO currently has a dividend yield just shy of the double digits of 9.8%, and that income is going to be paid out every single month. Now let's take a look at the dividend payments over the last 12 months. While the income amounts have fluctuated, the monthly payouts have increased over time. Something to keep in mind is that QDVO's dynamic options writing strategy means that it might not write any options at all or as frequently when markets are rising to gain more upside, as well as it may write more options on its holdings when markets are going sideways or downward. As for QQQI, this fund has a dividend yield of 13.6%, which it pays out monthly. Getting to the last year of dividend payments, QQQI has been very consistent in its distributions, with the income ranging between 61 cents to 64 cents a share. With the growth and volatility that the NASDAQ 100 has been experiencing, this fund has been providing amazing yield so far. On to GPIQ, this ETF has a dividend yield of 9.8%, and it also pays out monthly. Here's the last 12 months of dividend payments from GPIQ, which you can see it's been fairly stable and has also slightly increased, with the income ranging from roughly 41 cents to 47 cents per share. Last is JEPQ, which has a dividend yield of 10.2%, which is paid monthly. And here's a look at the last year of dividend payments, where you can see that JEPQ's income can vary month by month, offering a little less stability in the income amounts. Looking at the dividend yields, QQQI stands out the most from the group, and QDVO is on the lower end of the group, but that doesn't necessarily make it better than QDVO. Remember, QDVO prioritizes capital appreciation first and high income second, so it should be expected that it'll come short of a fund that's geared towards trying to provide consistent high income. With that being said, it still offers a competitive yield compared to the other three funds that sell call options on the NASDAQ 100 index. It all boils down to the strategy of these funds, which you'll see later how they differ in performance as well. Nothing comes free, so let's dig into the fees for QDVO and the other ETFs. For the fees, QDVO has an expense ratio of 0.55%, costing you $55 per year for every $10,000 invested. So a little bit high, but remember, this is an actively managed fund. For QQQI, it has an expense ratio of 0.68%, costing $68 a year for every $10,000 invested. GPIQ has an expense ratio of 0.29%, and then JEPQ has an expense ratio of 0.35%. These fees aren't too crazy for actively managed funds, especially when you consider that the costs are baked into the total returns, which all the funds have done pretty well. But in the end, QDVO is the second highest here, and GPIQ easily takes the cake for the cheapest of the four. When it comes to taxes, there are a few slight differences between these four monthly dividend ETFs, but small differences can go a long way. QDVO is pretty tax efficient when it comes to its income payouts, and that's because a majority of the income that it provides is classified as ROC, or also known as return of capital. When it comes to return of capital, the income isn't classified as ordinary income, and instead, these return of capital distributions reduce your cost basis and allow your taxes to be deferred until you sell the shares or your cost basis becomes zero. For example, with QDVO, you can take a look at the fund's Section 19A to see how much the estimates for return of capital were on the last payout. And what's left over is ordinary income, but just note that these are estimates and the final classifications won't be known until the official year-end data is provided. And the payout percentages can change from month to month. QQQI is also a fund in which a majority of the income that's paid out is classified as return of capital, but it also comes with another benefit, which is that it uses NASDAQ index options, which are favorably taxed. And index options are classified as Section 1256 contracts from the IRS, which allows them to receive 60% long-term and 40% short-term capital gains tax. This would apply to the portion of income that's not return of capital. GPIQ falls into the same boat as QQQI with primarily ROC distributions and the advantages of using 1256 contracts. JEPQ is the odd one out of the group, with just about all of its income being classified as non-qualified dividends or ordinary income. And that's because those ELNs let the fund distribute option premium income to investors as dividends, and that income from selling those ELNs are taxed as ordinary income. This makes JEPQ the least tax efficient out of the group, of course, given that it's not in a tax advantaged account. QDVO, QQQI, and GPIQ all receive primarily ROC distributions, making them the most tax efficient. I'd give a tiny edge over QQQI and GPIQ just for the fact that even if there's a small amount of non-ROC income, there's a tax advantage due to those 1256 contracts. Next, let's talk about the performance of QDVO and how it stands compared to QQQI, GPIQ, and JEPQ. Now, QDVO was created in August 2024, so it's still pretty new and doesn't have a long history of returns, but since it's been created, it's had total returns, including dividends, of nearly 35%. And its returns, when it comes to just its price appreciation alone, so no dividends, is just over 19%, providing some solid returns so far. So none of these ETFs are that old, with QQQI being created in January 2024, GPIQ in October 2023, and JEPQ in May 2022. Not a lot of history to compare over, so I'll just be comparing since the time that QDVO's been around. Here's the total returns, including dividends, of all four of these ETFs since August 2024. And coming at the top, we have QDVO with the highest returns of about 35%, with GPIQ at 29%, QQQI at 28%, and last, JEPQ at around 26%. So QDVO has made a nice little gap so far, thanks to the nice growth it's experienced. And if we look at just the price returns, so not including dividends, QDVO really stands out, with GPIQ doing pretty good as well. And the performance differences are due to the different strategies that these funds are using. QDVO writes its call options, which are typically out of the money on individual stocks that it holds, but like I mentioned before, it might not write any options at all, or as often when the market is rising, which will allow it to capture more upside, so it's going to have strong price gains compared to the others. GPIQ uses at-the-money call options on a smaller portion of the portfolio on a weekly basis. And while they have a dynamic strategy as well to write call options on 25 to 75% of the portfolio, similar to QDVO, when markets are rallying, it can gain better upside. For For that reason, GPIQ and QDVO are going to have much more potential price appreciation compared to the other two funds. QQQI, on the other hand, does laddered calls, which can enable them to capture more of the premium written. And while the percentage of the portfolio that they write options on can vary, it tends to be on a much larger majority of the portfolio. Their strategy allows them to generate that high and consistent income, while the potential capital appreciation will be smaller than QDVO and GPIQs. Unlike the other ETFs, JEPQ sells call options through ELNs to generate income. The concepts of ELNs can be quite complicated, and unfortunately, there isn't much transparency on how these ELNs that JEPQ uses operates, and by that I mean the exact details of their options. But in short, the ELNs that JEPQ buys are set up like a cover call strategy, and they have short call positions within them. And the ELNs provide cash flow for JEPQ based on the premiums received from selling call options. So when it comes to strictly performance, QDVO comes out on top, and that's due to its strategy and management. But hopefully now you can see that the strategies of these funds are what really determines if they lean more into price appreciation or higher yield. And GPIQ being a runner-up is a great example. Although it's based on the NASDAQ 100, it's had great appreciation and it's had yields close or slightly above QDVO's. So who is QDVO for, and is it the best when it comes to the higher yielding monthly ETFs? I think it goes without saying, first and foremost, that this fund shouldn't even be on your radar if you don't need monthly income. If you're in the accumulation phase of your investing journey, all these cover call ETFs are going to limit the upside, and you're better off holding the underlying assets to benefit from all the potential growth opportunities. Now, if you're looking for an ETF that can provide some solid income that's higher than more traditional ETFs, QDVO can be a very strong option. It gives you exposure to a variety of stocks with growth characteristics, allowing you to benefit from the appreciation of the fund's holdings, while also managing to provide some income by writing options on some or all of the holdings. The key benefit of QDVO's strategy is that while you also receive income, in times like now during a rising bull market, the fund allows you to capitalize on much more of the upside. And QDVO's amazing growth doesn't necessarily make it the best ETF compared to QQQI, GPIQ, and JEPQ, as it will depend on what strategy that you prefer more. For example, if you want consistent, stable, and higher yields, QQQI might be a better choice. The type of accounts that the fund is held in and the tax efficiency of the fund is something to consider as well. The good news is that you don't have to only pick one of these ETFs. There could be two fund strategies that you like, and maybe that can make up a portion of your income portfolio, or however you want your portfolio set up to be to meet your goals and needs. And if you'd like to see more options of some great high-yielding monthly dividend ETFs, then check out this video here. Or if you want to learn about a dividend ETF that outperforms the S&P 500 and SCHD, then watch this video here. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content, and I'll be seeing you on the next one.